Welcome to the Conscious Diva podcast. I'm Tatiana, and joining me back on my show is the beautiful Mara Branscome. She is coming back on to talk about her second book, Sage, Huntress, Lover, Queen. Access your power and creativity through Sacred Female Archetypes. This was a really cool conversation about the 7 feminine archetypes, which I really enjoyed. And Mara shares some really beautiful stories, how she came up with this idea, and all kinds of mind, body, and somatic rituals and practices to teach you how to embody each archetype and activate a life of fulfillment and happiness. This was a truly enjoyable conversation that I hope you enjoy as much as me. Thank you for listening. Well, it's so great to see you again. Thank you.
You too.
Amazing. You look beautiful and radiant.
Oh, thank you. A little underslept, but as we go.
Nice. Well, I was really enjoying your book, and it's just tell me how has it been with this book versus your other book, your first book? Because I enjoyed both of your books, and I really felt like this one went a little deeper, than Ritual as Remedy. It was like quite esoteric, which I loved.
Yes. Well, I think it's the deepening of the writing process and allowing that voice to speak that I discovered to be a very interesting process, a very deep process. And so the process has been very different in a way that I didn't know. I feel like even though Ritual as Remedy was a surprise that I wrote that book in a way, because I got that real strong download of it's time to write. That's a book. That book is ready to be born into the world. With Sage, Huntress, Lover, Queen, it was quite striking because I was actually writing a book of poetry and blessings, in fact. And what happened, Tatiana, was that I started looking, I printed them all out. I mean, there must have been 50 or something. I printed them all out and I had them scattered all on my living room floor. Because I sit on the floor to do everything. I write on the floor. I sit in my meditation seat to do everything. And I scattered all these blessings and these prayer poems around me. And I realized that there was formulas and codes and imprints and patterns, which were of the archetypes. And so this was quite striking to me. And so I started organizing, this is like the mother energy. Oh, this is Huntress warrior spirit. This is, and they resonate also with me to the chakra, the energy centers and the elements. So it felt quite immersive and rich in the process in that way.
And as you were telling the story just now, I was like, oh, okay, I can totally get how you landed there, because when I was reading it, I was wondering, and the book's name again is Sage, Huntress, Lover, Queen, and it is a archetypal, well, it's the 7 archetypes, but feminine archetypes. And so I was wondering, because they're not, although the mother and perhaps the sage and lover are traditional archetypes as we might find in film and literature and stories, myth, but you definitely have some new ones in there. And I was actually curious as to how the feminine archetypes came about. So can you talk more about that? How, and maybe compare them? Have you thought even about the traditional ones, which tend to be more masculine, right? Even though some of them have a gender neutral name, like the explorer or the creator or the hero or the outlaw or the magician,
right.
I feel like most people tend to think of those as male.
Yes. And I felt through this process, what came forward in these sacred female archetypes was this movement that I feel that the world is at the precipice upon. We are upon some great change in the world at this time. And my relationship to that change is to empower the feminine in a way that has never been empowered before, in a way that is both ancient and contemporary. So when I was researching about the archetypes, and what struck me was that the 7 that I chose are somewhat developmental stages, cycles of our life. And it really hit home when I started working with some of these archetypes, let's say the mystic, let's say the huntress or the maiden, that I've supported so many women in the past probably 20 years of my life in the work that I do. And so what I was seeing and researching and feeling and sensing was that these are patterns that I have seen in all of these women that I have supported as a spiritual coach, so that they can go and live their best life, they can access their dreams, they can heal from past trauma, karmic or, ancestral. And so there was this, it was a strong awakening for me to write this, perhaps to heal parts of myself as well, for sure. And to go into that and to go, okay, what does it mean to call the mystic forward through a feminine lens? What does it mean to call the sage, the elder, forward, especially in this modern era where, aging is kind of pushed down or fixed, or, we need to fix this and we need to fix that. And what about the incredible wisdom that lives in the sage within? And one thing more I'd like to say, so in that really resonated through my work, is that, well, how can I see this through the feminine lens, not necessarily of the past feminine, not necessarily gendered, but what does that mean? Inclusivity, diversity, holding space for a softer approach that is more focused, in fact, a softer approach that is more clear
Mm.
and that is more holistic and refined. And it has all these nuances that we can empower.
Well, share your seven feminine archetypes, and maybe just as it's described, you have really lovely little blurbs about each one.
Mhm.
Would you mind just explaining or sharing these seven?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I want to say before I call these forward, archetypes are not stereotypes. So let's create space for that right now, for all the, everyone listening when they hear this podcast, is if we can kind of let go of our stereotypical, oh, I'm this or that, or defined by this or that. So what archetypes are: patterns, and they're formulas, and they're codes that live in humanity. And once we can start to see that, what we can then embody is the essence, the power, the gift of the archetype, and even more so, the shadow, and the shadow of the archetype, which is where the healing really is. And so what I'll do is I'll give the archetypes really just one word really for the essence, and I'll give one word for the shadow, so that listeners can kind of get a sense. When I started to work with the shadow in these feminine archetypes, I was blown away at how abundant the material is to work with.
Mm,
So we
mm,
call forward the maiden. The maiden can be accessed at any time of life. The maiden has a true zest, a zhuzh, an adventurous spirit, the traveler. And the maiden's shadow work is naivete, being naive, maybe even to manipulate others. And then we call forward the mother, and she's the creator, she's the nurturer, the nourisher, the one who brings new life or projects into the world. And the mother's work is, her shadow lives in the victim or the martyr consciousness.
mhm.
That's a strong one for us in the world right now.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
sage is the sage. We call forward the sage is the elder wisdom. And I often think about the sage being the one who has their emotional process in attunement.
And I like how you have the sage, both the sage and the mystic, because they're different.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing that forward. So the sage has this emotional capacity to be steady, to be harmonious, to be attuned to her aging process, or her developing, her maturation process. And the shadow of the sage could be feeling disconnected from society, or shutting down from community. And then we call for the huntress, and the huntress has that warrior spark, that passion, that divine will right at the solar plexus, that fiery energy to go and do life in the way that you want to do life. And the Huntress's shadow is hardening, um, being I would say even an over identification with the masculine in a way. And so looking at that, and then we call forward the lover, fierce self-love, sensual, embodied, feminine, um, absolutely accepting of her body as her temple. And the shadow energy of the lover is over dramatization in relationships, or sometimes that kind of self-loathing, disconnection from the body as the temple. And then we call forward the mystic, and the mystic is from the star energy, is able to, I don't like to use the word channel, but I want to say that there is a deep curiosity, and a deep union with the energy of the planets and the stars, a natural attunement with that, and also the development of the intuitive spirit and soul.
Mm-hmm.
And the mystic's shadow is in perhaps getting so into an otherworldly plane that they're not able to be here in this human world. And we need the mystics to be on the human world and on the planet to help us heal and to become the leaders also.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like in action, like spirit in action. And then we call forward the queen, and the queen holds, oh, beautiful leadership of love, of right action, of a nuanced energy. I'm not talking about the colonial queen energy at all. I'm talking about the queen that can lead from love, with love and power. And then the queen's shadow is a tendency to be a perfectionist and not get the job done, to have inertia because they're fearing that it's not perfect. And I'll just call forward one more, and it's the weaver. And the weaver came forward at the very end of this writing journey for me, very powerful and strong. The weaver is an energy that's archetypal, that is at the center of each one of us. And I describe that in the book. The weaver, inside the weaver's energy is all the archetypes I just described. And so that energy lives inside of us at the center of our body, ready to be utilized at any cycle of our life, at any time. The joys, the challenges, to harmonize and to be essentially sovereign beings on this planet.
I love all of the descriptions, and thank you for explaining what an archetype is. I was going to ask you that question. Mm-hmm. And also for clarifying that these aren't necessarily aspects that we should go, oh yeah, I'm a queen, or I'm this, or I'm that.
Yes.
In that sort of egoic sense, and which is why having the weaver included in the end is really lovely, because we for sure encompass all of these aspects. Because initially when you first start reading it, it's easy to identify with aspects of the archetypes you've just described. I mean, for me, for sure, I straight away, I was like, oh, I've got, the maiden. and then as I got through the maiden, I was like, no, actually. And then I was identifying with, or not identifying with, shadow aspects or past stuff that I'd worked through already in my early life. For example, the mystic, I really identify with a lot. Even my husband has always called me the oracle for many years. Oh. But I have a few friends that say, you're a mystic, you're a mystic. So it was a funny label, and I did resonate with both the descriptions of the light side of the mystic and also the shadow side of the mystic, not so much as it's described with the guru-disciple relationship or in the spiritual world, where there's been people that have misled their followers, but more in the sense of what you just described earlier, with the notion of, you can get really lost in that world. You can get really lost in the mystical, and which is, the path of the householder with if anyone's familiar with the tantric practice, this is a fine line of being very present in the world, but also attuning oneself to higher aspects. So anyway, so thank you. There's so many great descriptions here. And I wanted you just to expand on, even though we've said don't necessarily pick one, and I've just shared, I clearly have picked one, the mystic. Why is it important for us to identify the aspects of ourselves, both the shadow side and the lightness, in these archetypes?
Great question. And it's as if the work then is presented to us, and it's right here for us when we open ourselves to that shadow energy. And it really gives us sparks and tools and curiosities if we can stay open enough, if we can spot it. Because a lot of times we'll say, oh no, I don't. I've talked to lots of folks about this book so far, and as I've heard a bit of a theme, which is at first glance, that's like a bit of a repulsion, or like, no, I'm not that. I don't want to, I don't even want to associate with that archetype, or, and so often I feel that's where the work is, so if you've got, if you can spot it, you got it, right?
I spotted it and I was like, oh, I've done that work. Okay. I felt like
Yeah.
I had moved through those aspects. And so I was like, oh, I can see how I have those qualities from whoever, the mother and,
And
the sage and all these
yes,
other things.
totally. I
And I was,
mean, big stuff there.
yeah,
Big stuff.
sure.
And so for example, here's a good example for working with an archetype. So if you're working with the mother archetype, there's just so much, whether it be you're healing your relationship to your mother's line, your mother's lineage, your grandmother, your great grandmother. A lot of us have experienced, karmic trauma, ancestral trauma. So we inherited, stories and narratives, and it's actually in our cells in our body. And if we are curious and open enough, we have an opportunity to go in there and to unpack that in a very compassionate, self-forgiving way. So that's what I want to bring forward, is when we work with this shadow here, and why it's so important is we can start, it can be a mirror to us.
Yeah.
It's not that we have to go and fix everything, and we have to immediately go out there, and it's not that. It's that it it can open doors and lenses that personally I never even thought I would get to. And so, for example, with the mother, I can, raising, also because I am a mother, and raising my children and being in this culture that we're in at this time, and this very distracted, highly, disconnected world, yet we're so connected for in all these other ways.
Mhm.
And it's a really exciting time also to be a mother, because there's a whole new consciousness coming through our children. What a blessing. All of it is so big and deep. And I have to check my story every single day. Am I falling into a martyr path? Am I falling into a victim path? So we want to bring forward the questions like this when we're working with the mother. Ask yourself, or be curious when you say, I am always this, or I am never that. I am always tired. I'm always the one doing the work. I'm never I never have a moment to be calm and peaceful. Like that energy. Well, where did I pick that up from? Some patterning from my family, for sure. That's playing out in my current life, for sure. And when I understand that I'm doing that, I can have compassion, and I can start to reroute it in the moment, just by going, oh, okay, you're tired. Yeah, you need a little break. Go have a big glass of water, go for a walk in nature, and then connect with Mother Earth and the whole mother energy too. I love working with the mother archetype, because to me, it's working with Mother Earth. It is being in deep union with Mother Earth. And I think a lot of folks can resonate with that. When we're in nature, we feel replenished. We feel part of, connected to something much greater than our small life. We
Mhm.
feel perhaps lit up by the colors and the abundance and the sustenance. So
Yes.
that's a practical example of some of the work that's in the book.
Well, you also have really beautiful rituals and poetry and somatic practices and meditations. And then you've got movement to tap into the deeper aspects of the shadow and the self. Can you just share a little bit about some of this? And it's not for everyone. The one that I quite enjoyed as I was reading the Mystic, I had never heard of Hildegard of Bin. Is it Bingen or
Oh,
Bingen?
Bingen.
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 Okay, Hildegard
Yes.
Bingen. And so I had to look her up, and especially because we talk about the music. And then I did that, and I listened to, gosh, they're really, so it's medieval music, obviously, because she's from that medieval period, and not even modernized, just played in present day with oh gosh, not an orchestra, but like a symphony, and there was
Yes.
like a choir singing the songs, which aren't necessarily in English. Gosh, it was so moving. I was transported to a cathedral where I could really just, I did it as a meditation. I sat at my altar, and I brought my laptop, and I played something from YouTube, and just allowed that, and just absorbed the beautiful sounds, the music, and just let myself be taken by the practice to see where that would go. So it was really beautiful. So thank you for that. So
Oh, you're so welcome. And that's exactly what you're describing is what I would hope that the reader would be able to experience.
well, share a dancing one, like, or I should say a movement one. Just share. I'd asked you before, and then I of course shared mine, but share how the other somatic practices and the movement practices.
Yes, and I think I have one in the lover. So the first part of the chapter is all about the actual archetype. And there's lots of poetry in here. And then the second part of the chapter is practices for embodying that archetype. And they're basically like formulas and rituals that I've created to align with what I would feel would open oneself up to that archetype. And so here's the Awaken the Sensual Goddess, the Lover's Dance. So essentially, it's, when you have that kitchen dance party and you do, your when no one's home and you get into it and and specifically though in this one I'm calling forward the lover to support folks in reconnecting with their temple. And so to move their hips and to, and to wear something, that makes you feel really nice when you're dancing. And it's like what in the lover, and as I call forward, like be sexy for you, and so that kind of, it's not about being or performing for someone else. And that's a really big part of this book. It's like, okay, who am I when I'm home alone and no one's there, and what can I do in that moment to really start to harmonize with my soul and to awaken new cycles that are ready to come alive. And I tell you, when I wrote this, the lover was hard for me to write. It was hard for me to write. I actually wrote the mystic first. I said, oh yeah, I can really get into that.
I could feel that you were really getting into the mystic. I was like, she's a mystic. This is Mara.
This is my wheelhouse. I'm like, let's download everything.
You totally wrote it like it was
mystic.
totally coming from the heart. Like, I get it. Yep, 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 I feel you.
And then but guess what? That helped me to write the lover.
Oh.
That was a stepping stone for me to then get right into the lover and to also see what was my resistance there. And then I started to get it, which was that I wanted to embrace it myself and share that with that deep kind of erotica for self, and or that energy of that deep oneness of tantra. I'm not talking about tantra sex, of tantra, so that lover energy could be like deep source, deep source. It's a body of work.
Yes, for sure. That is a deep, and thank you for bringing up the word tantra and also following that with the statement, not sex, because that is a practice that invokes a love of the self, an understanding of our connection to something deeper or profound, which I imagine as you were writing that chapter on the lover allowed you to open up to that. I'm guessing just sort of allowed you to flow into what that means on a deeper level. It's not about being better at sex with a physical, right?
Or being sexy for
or
the
being
world,
sexy.
for
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
Yeah, so
talking to
that
your
was
body image.
really,
Yeah.
really liberating for me. I've always shied away from that anyway, of like being sexy for, I was never a precocious young adult even. I remember actually being afraid to bring a partner home in fear of, I don't know, some sort of judgment from my family. So obviously there's work there for me to do.
Mm.
So of being comfortable in that. And so in the book also there's blessings and there's affirmations. And just because we're on this, can I read a couple lines from
Yes, please
a
share.
lover's
Oh,
blessing?
I would
Because I
love
feel
to.
like, and it's always so curious where these conversations go, and I didn't, know I've never talked about the lover in this way with anyone. So thank you for this conversation. And so there's a lover's blessing, and this is kind of, in the embodiment practices,
Mhm.
and it's very simple. Today I say yes to love. I choose to infuse my heart, body, and mind with goodness. I lay down the perceptions that diminish my compassion. I slide out of the narratives that block me from loving myself and others fully. I allow my spirit to be steeped in loving awareness long enough to cleanse the residue of loss, pain, and unhappiness. Breath by breath, I forgive and begin again. I return to the temple of love.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it was important for you to share that so listeners can understand what we're essentially breaking down, that this is the power of love resides within every one of us. And when we understand that, there's such a freeing power to that that connects us to something so much greater, the source of ultimate love, right? Where we all come from, we all will return. Ancient spiritual traditions talk about this in similar but different ways, but there's always an understanding of expansiveness and the spanda and what is happening here. And we're just, particularly in the Western world, we're really, as women, taught to be provocative, use our bodies, dress in a certain way for attention. And some people are totally okay with that, and that's perfectly fine. But it's not the way it should be, right?
And we go one step further when we have the desire to draw attention to the external. Well, where's what's going on internally? And how can we build the internal temple at any stage of life? We go through all of these stages and cycles and developments. And I love when I've been speaking about this work. I love to ask the question. I love to ask you. What how do you feel the feminine is calling, and how can it support in your healing or your personal journey, and how can it support the world at this time? Like, what does the feminine feel or sense, or what is that in you right
Mm.
now?
Thank you for asking me. And I actually thought about that with your book, because I wondered, well, I wonder if she's gonna ask me, not that question exactly, but a
Yeah.
variation. And the feminine, it exists in all of us and in everything, and having the incredible gift of being able to live in nature right outside my doorstep. There it is. I'm surrounded by trees, and I feel her exuberance, her creativity, her love. And there's an all pervasiveness. And I've been doing a lot of like deep spiritual work for a very long time, and I've also been writing a book, and I've been working on that. And so through my own book, there's been healing aspects that I've been tapping into through the goddess that I'm deeply connected to and guided in the Himalayan tradition, and that goddess's name is Naga Kanya. And so there's that feminine aspect that comes in from this divine, very spiritual, very ancient tradition that I feel supported by. And then here in the tangible world, I'm surrounded by nature. This was a guided process coming to live here a few years ago. And yet at the same time, when I'm not in the forest and I'm moving in, sometimes you've got to be in the city. Sometimes I've got to be in New York City or somewhere else. And it's interesting. And that feels very masculine in the city with the concrete and the buildings and, you know, just everything's so structured and there's a lot of electricity and all stuff's going on. And it's often that's more of a challenge to find the feminine in those situations. I have to really bring it from within. And in that instance, when I'm going into the city, I find I don't dress provocatively when I'm in the city, actually ever, but I'm dressed more feminine-like in that I'll have flowy clothes on, or I feel like I need to represent the feminine outwardly by dressing as I guess more like a Greek goddess in a sense. Not that I see myself as a Greek goddess, but that kind of, you know, I love the look of that. And although I don't practice in the Greek tradition, the goddesses from at all like that. I just feel like, I mean, even this top I've got on now, it's kind of flouncy and so it's interesting because it comes in different ways, but I do enjoy feeling into all that is, everything that's around me and attuning myself to that. And it's something that I've been doing for a very, very long time. So that's how I interpret and embody the feminine in different aspects. And sometimes it's even with I love to have a bouquet of fresh flowers in my house on the table. I love to have crystals all around me. I really enjoy that aspect. I really love to feel the wind blowing my hair, unkept hair, out in the wind, like feeling in the warmer months that I can do this. And I love to hold and nurture my children. My son is 19 and he's way taller than me, and I will call him in and I'll say, okay, come here, put your head on my chest, let me just hold you. You just need to be held right now. I can feel it. Come here and lay your giant body across the sofa and just put your head on me, and let me just pretend you're the size of the cat again. And
that's beautiful.
we have a cat called Lakshmi who's very feminine, who's a fairy in a cat body. So anyway.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I know. I love what you said about the all pervasiveness of the feminine. And there's something around that will support us in over identifying with the masculine. And I think it's a really interesting, you know, we've lived the masculine and the patriarchy runs very strong. And so that was another impulse to write this book. It's not to be the, you know, I'm a feminist for sure. I actually studied women's study. I started studying women's studies when I was 17. I was in high school, but I took my first, you know, college level course while I was in high school with my mother, which was so cool. And it was in women's studies. I have a minor in women's studies. And, you know, it's interesting because that was a long time ago that, you know, I studied in that way. And when this book came through and forward, it was really sparked by the ways in which I think, and then what motivates me. And I ask myself, am I feeding a system of patriarchy? Am I over identifying with that to be the female, to be the mother leader, to be the author, to be the, you know, wellness leader, so that this good stuff to be able to ask ourselves, like, what system am I feeding at this time? And that, I think, will really support us moving forward in this new way. And I call it coming forward in the book is the new feminine way. The new feminine way. So what was striking is that, because I've done a lot of work on the goddess and goddess culture and goddesses and the divine feminine in the past, just, you know, myself, and something that was coming through in the writing, it just felt quite different than simply identifying with the divine feminine. It felt more like a call to action. In how we run our businesses, in how, you know, in the words that we choose to say, and how we raise our children. And I hope that these questions will help us as leaders of love in action out into the world.
Well, for sure, that definitely comes through. And, you know, my description of the feminine can sound very kind of woo-woo, or like, what is she talking about? I'm just getting out there and running to the forest with my thing, the wind blowing through my hair. But actually, there's a much deeper and underlying deeper connection that I have not just the respect that I'm experiencing or have, but a power that it gives me. It gives me the power to be me as a woman at this time.
Yes.
And that's really what it gives me. And so even though that description sounds quite fluffy, it's not. I'm very comfortable doing those things. I feel completely supported in both the natural world, by the natural world, but also the unseen world. And I feel very supported here in the physical realm. And that gives me the freedom to do the things that I'm able to do with whoever I'm supporting, or and whether it's my husband, my family, my children, or my friends, or through my work. And so that's so I just wanted to add that and clarify.
Thank you.
Running
I
around
love what you
imagining
said.
myself as a Greek goddess.
Why not? Why not?
In loose, whatever flowy white clothes. But no, but there's something super freeing about that. You go to these ancient sites. There's almost like sometimes I see myself in like another time in a forest being worshipped as if I was not like not the deity of not an oracle or whatever, but in some sort of scenario where we sort of like, and I really experienced this in India. I don't know if you've been to the yogini temples, but there is such a power of the yogini temples in India where you have the 64 yoginis in all of their form, in different emanations, different aspects of that represent women in different strength forms. They're archetypes in a sense, different in these 64 archetypes. And so it's quite empowering. In the center is an altar where a yogini in human form would be worshipped. There would be a ritual would take place, and not necessarily a sexual ritual, but an offering and honorings, and they definitely weren't killing rituals, but they were honoring and respecting and just calling in this divine feminine, the divine power to embody the people of the village or the people that were coming there. And so they're really incredible, very, very sacred. And so those experiences when I've been there, and then it's something definitely shifted. There was a remembrance of some other time that came, and I've had a few moments when I've been in a deep state where I actually have seen myself on that altar, on that big slab of concrete, and it's sort of and things were going on. So I call on that, but then I adapt that into this much gentler, approach to whatever I'm doing in my life. So.
Oh, and I think you spoke it so clearly, and thank you for sharing that about the yogini temples. I think that's so inspiring, and that's exactly it. Like we get these imprints through our soul work, through the conscious work we're doing, and it allows something to open, and it gives us energy, and it affirms a creation that is alive in us, that we never know then what's going to go from there. I think this is the work, is that we drop into these places with curiosity, with an energy that holds reverence for the mystical and the mysterious.
Yeah.
And then our consciousness expands, and we become perhaps more aware of certain stories that we play out. I mean, that's really it. It's like this is a practical application to daily life in this modern world, I feel, is to understand these feminine archetypes. What I found is it helps me to understand others more as well. It helps me to have compassion for others and to not take on their negativity if it's being projected towards me. It's been quite powerful to understand and to have compassion, and to not have to fight back necessarily, because there is a deeper understanding of me. Oh, that shadow's playing out. I can see that. That's really tangible. It's palpable. That energy is right in front of me, or even in my daughters, in my husband. I can see it playing out. I mean, it's incredible. Then I have compassion for his mother wound. I have compassion for his mother wound. And I can show up for him in a way that isn't like, you didn't give me this or you didn't give me that. I am understanding where it's coming from.
When you come from a place of compassion, loving insights of that person's trauma, regardless of how deep or how vast or how big or how tiny it might be, it comes out. They're projecting it in a certain way. And compassion gives us permission to just step back and appreciate and maybe help that person.
And become less fatigued on a daily basis. Let's bring that forward,
Yeah, and less judgmental.
Also, yes. Less trying to get something from someone, less holding on, less gripping, more freedom.
Which is, I think, ultimately what everybody wants. They want to be free, right? They want to be free. And so you have, like I said in the very start, I thought this book was more esoteric, and for sure it is. Like, for sure, like you are really, you're honing in. You did, like, this came to you from a higher place. But I wondered, can you, because you have very different practices in here, but they were, some of them I felt like if someone wanted to also, if they hadn't got your other book, Ritual as Remedy, that you could add on almost. I was like, oh, we could take and I know they're not designed, they're totally standalone books, but I could see, having read your other book, that I could see how a person might go, or if they weren't, maybe they needed to do more work or explore the elements and how that relates. I really thought they're companion books in a sense.
Yes. Well, thank you for saying that, because they are, and it's kind of like they were the call and the response together. Like one, I mean, maybe Ritual as Remedy was the call for me to enter into the world of writing, and perhaps Sage, Huntress, Lover, Queen is the response. And that's the first time I've ever thought about that right now. So I'm just going to say that, just putting that together. And in fact, when Ritual as Remedy was coming out, and we had this conversation 1 year, like just about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, about Ritual as Remedy, I had finished this book already. Because everything is a year and you know what I mean. So Ritual as Remedy was handed in already a year and a half before that, and so it was interesting because as Ritual as Remedy was coming out, I was doing edits to the new book. So that is an interesting process, and so there is a lot of merging, and there is the deepening of. I think the Ritual brings forward a lot of the feminine, because the practices are nurturing, and they're different practices than what's out there, what's readily out there, different than going to the gym or a yoga class even. Very different. They're more self-guided, and so that to me is the feminine too, is when we can really do the work of self-guiding. I really feel that really strong, and I feel that's the work that is going to help us heal this ourselves and the planet and become more connected, is when we do our inner work. And how do we do that? And I just want to inspire everyone. And I know, Tatiana, you are a meditator, and I want to inspire everyone to get on their meditation cushion every day, 5 minutes even. And that's how I've written these books. That's how I've done the work. And I really rely on my morning meditation to center me. And it's not like I'm searching for anything, but I'm returning to center. I'm allowing anything that's busy and overwhelm me and whoa, what is this life, is that I call upon divine will at the center. I call upon compassion, and I call upon that like deep source love to steady me for the day.
I love that. And it really can just be 5 minutes. You can even listen to something. It doesn't have to be a mantra-based practice. It can be actually anything. Even going for a 5-minute walk around the block can be meditative, or walking your dog. It's just that time you spend with yourself that centers you into the moment. And really allows, your higher self to speak to you. Yeah, it is important. So thank you for that reminder. And so when is your book out? Sage, Huntress, Lover, Queen, Access Your Power and Creativity Through Sacred Female Archetypes. When I know you can pre-order it now, but when will it be available? And then tell us how to get it.
Well, actually July 25th is publication date. And it's very exciting. And so, you can order it wherever you get your books. And I love to encourage people to ask their local bookshop to carry the book so that we can support local businesses. as well. And I'm going to have all sorts of events coming up. It's very exciting. And I love to, I teach with these books too. So I'm leading a few retreats this year, and I work with the books as part of the program. So, and then I'll be doing a book club in the fall. That will be an immersive experience. And what I love to do, and it's from all the years of teaching, is I bring together the movement practices with the breath work, with the meditation, and the reading, so that we can try it out. We can embody it in different aspects of our mind body temple.
And can you find that on your website at marabranscome.com?
Yes. And that, just go to my main site.
Okay.
And you will find everything. And in fact, the book has its own website. So, but it's all linked on the main page of my main site. So.
Yes, femininearchetypesbook.com. So you can
and you can, if you pre-order, you get all these bonuses. You get a poem, an audio poem, you get a meditation, a guided meditation where I call forward all the archetypes. And so that will give everyone a deeper sense of the work.
It was lovely to talk to you again. I love sharing your wisdom, and thank you again for being here today with me.
Thank you. Thank you, Tatiana, for having me and for all that you do in the world.